All right, so the thing about Jayber Crow is people either love it or they don't love it. And people have let me know over the weeks. And so this is what I don't want. People have been ba 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 or ba 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 ba. And I don't want you to sit here and going, okay? So I've moved the podium because I don't want to be this a Jayber Crow lecture. And I want you to participate, okay? Everything's on the table. There won't be any throwing of anything, okay? At least I won't throw at you if you do me the same favor. So I told James what we should have instead of nachos is a little water drinking party. Yes. And if you haven't read the book, that's where they go to a little water drinking party. And you bring your, whatever you want to dilute your water, you bring that to dilute your water, okay? But anyhow, James won't be here tonight, so I texted him and I said, well, since you're not gonna be here, we might just have a little water drinking party. So I don't think he'll agree with that.
What's in your water, Mrs. Phillips?
Water. Yes, water, yes. So this book is my favorite book. I go back and forth between Robinson Crusoe and Jayber Crow. And definitely Jayber Crow has surfaced to the top. I've read it, I don't know, 10, 11, 12 times. And every single time I just get more and more out of it. So I read it a few months ago because it's one of those books when the world is spinning that I can get into, and then it sort of stops the motion back to the fundamental things, which Wendell Berry is all about the fundamental things in life. And so I read it a few months ago. Then I read That Distant Land, which is another book that you'll want to read. And then a couple weeks ago, I went back and I reread this one again. And it's just, it has topics that resonate with me because I had a perfect childhood and my world was wonderful. My dad was just like Athie Keith. And so this book is like a part of my real life. Not the life that I wish for, but the real life that I've actually had. So I want to start, if you'll turn in the front, just a couple pages in all the opening empty pages to the notice. Did y'all read the notice? Anybody? Say that again?
The notice to not try to get anything out of it?
No, well, that we're going to read it, and we'll see what it really says. Okay, so notice, persons attempting to find a text in this book will be prosecuted. So those of you that know me well know how much I love the Andy Griffith Show. There was a great disservice done to the Andy Griffith Show when they made a Sunday school curriculum out of the Andy Griffith Show. So Wendell Berry's saying, don't try to make this a classroom text. Don't have a question and answer where you try to get the right answer and all those things, okay? So you'll be prosecuted. Persons attempting to find a subtext in it will be banished. That's just about as bad. Semicolon. Persons attempting to explain, interpret, explicate, analyze, deconstruct, or otherwise understand it will be exiled to a desert island in the company of other explainers. And I don't know about you, I cannot think of anybody else I would love to be on an island with than Ron Gilly and Justin Hughes and James Cowart discussing Jayber Crow. That would be a dream come true. So you see, we have full permission. Wouldn't you want to be on a desert island with me talking about Jayber Crow? Yes, is your answer. See? And so that's what we're doing. Come in, Mr. White, get you a handout and come and join us. So I want you to discuss. I have a handout. It's just a very simple thing. We have some topics. So what happens is sometimes when you get ready to do a book discussion, you dig so deep and you organize it so much and then it becomes wooden. And I don't want that to happen. I just want us to talk about it. So the first time I read Jayber Crow, I was partway in it. I was reading at night. I called Justin Hughes and I said, "What is the plot? I cannot figure out the plot." And he said, "Well, there's not really a plot like you think of. You know, something has to be solved and you get clues and so forth." And I said, "Okay." So I finished reading the book, and by the time I got to the end, I knew that this was a book that had deeper things in it than I had given it justice, just whizzing through it. So I went back to the first page, I started the book all over again, and then I started digging deep. And that's what I've tried to do every time I read it. So a few weeks ago, Justin and I had lunch. We were walking downtown. I said, "Do you remember," I told him we were going to do this, and I said, "Do you remember that night I called you and asked you what the plot was?" And he said, "That was a ridiculous question, wasn't it?" And I said, "Yeah, I figured it out by the time I finished the book," but he was very kind and gentle. So it doesn't have so much as a plot as it has themes and lots of themes, okay? My mom always said that she only read a book on the surface. She didn't dig deep for anything underneath it. And the thing about Jayber Crow is if that's all you can do, man, it's a great story. It's just a great story. If you can dig a little deeper, man, it's just so rich. It's so rich. So I think about the Book of the Dun Cow, another one of my favorite books. If you just read it as a barnyard story, you've read it as a barnyard story. But man, if you can dig deep into it, that's what you want to do. You want to dig deep into it. So as I grew to love Jayber Crow, and I would get on websites for colleges and other classical schools, I'd notice, and they'd have a stack of books, you know, some have columns, and Jayber Crow, seemed like Jayber Crow was always in those stacks, and I thought, yeah, I'm not crazy to love this book. And I always think, people that are smarter than I am and think deeper than I do, people that I respect, like deeply like respect, like Ron Gilly, if they love a book, I should want to read that book. If Josh Gibbs loves Boethius, philosophy, Consolation of Philosophy, I should love that book. I should want to read that book and try to love that book like Josh Gibbs, because I respect Josh Gibbs so much. So those are just a couple of reasons that I love this book. It deals with those fundamental topics, which we're going to talk about. I hope you pulled some of those out. I love the way Wendell Berry phrases things. I love the part where Jayber says that Athey subtracted Troy Chatham's basketball skills and found not much left. I love how he words those things. I love how he talks about everyday life. And I'm just going to tell you a quick story and then we're going to move on. When my mom was dying, my family was around. We were all sitting around. And my mom made horrible meatloaf. And I'm telling you, I love meatloaf, but her meatloaf was so bad. And a few years before my dad died, my mom had come over and she was kind of miffed. And she said, "Bill told me today, please don't ever make meatloaf again." And I said, "Good. That should have happened a long time ago." And it was just bad meatloaf. Well, when the few hours before Mom died, we were all just sitting around, just talking. And the topic came up of meatloaf, and we started talking about meatloaf and how bad it was and how we like our meatloaf and meatloaf. And we got through talking about meatloaf, and I looked at the time and I said, "Oh, I need to give my mom another shot of morphine." Well, I looked at her, I saw that she was in the process right then of dying. And so After everything was over, my brother said, I cannot believe we were talking about meatloaf while she was dying. I go, I can. That's what real life is. You talk about what you live from minute to minute and second to second. And that's what this book does. There is nothing in your life that is not eternity. There just isn't. There's nothing that you can say, this doesn't count. How you get up in the morning, how you greet your husband, how you iron your clothes or don't iron your clothes, how you do your laundry, you keep up your house, how your work, every single thing. I tell my students how you put your books in your cubby hole. Count. It counts, and it's part of eternity. Where were you before you were born? You didn't begin life the second you popped out. You existed, and you just have gone from eternity to this eternity. We're in an eternity, and then we'll go on to other eternities, okay? All right, I'm going to read you a poem because you can't do Wendell Berry. Wendell Berry actually became famous first for his poetry before he ever became famous for his essays and his fiction, okay? This is probably my favorite Sabbath poem. This is a book you should have, and this is what you should do with it to help you understand it, because I don't find poetry easy to understand. And I had a very loving person, Justin Hughes, who sat down with me one day and showed me how to go through these poems. The timbered choir are some of the Sabbath poems. There's several books of Sabbath poems, but it could be one of 3 Sabbaths. It could be the Sabbath that comes at the end of every 7-day period. It could be the Sabbath, the 7th day of creation, or it could be the Sabbath, which all the other Sabbaths are a picture of, and that is we work 6 days all through life, and our Sabbath rest is heaven. So this poem is very easy to tell which one of those Sabbaths it is, and it's on your paper, and you can follow along. As you learn to read poetry, Wendell Berry's made it very easy. You don't read to the end of the line and pause. You read to the end of the thought. Whether it's a period or a semicolon, you can tell where the thought is, okay? So just follow along with me. To sit and look at light-filled leaves may let us see, or seem to see, far backward as through clearer eyes, to what unsighted hope believes. The blessed conviviality that sang creation's 7th sunrise. So you can tell right away it's talking about which Sabbath. Back at creation, okay? See it? Creation's 7th sunrise. The blessed conviviality, what would that be? Anybody? Take a stab at it. Conviviality. Blessed conviviality. The Father, Son, the Holy Spirit at creation. Time when the Maker's radiant sight made radiant everything he saw. Didn't he do that? Didn't he say, that's good. And everything he saw was filled with perfect joy and life and light. His perfect pleasure was sole law. No pleasure had become self-willed. For all his creatures were his pleasures, and their whole pleasure was to be what he made them. They sought no gain or growth beyond their proper measures, nor longed for change or novelty. The only new thing could be pain, which was what? Sin, yeah. Isn't that a beautiful poem? It's a beautiful, the way to read those, read one a day, read it over day after day after day. All right, Jayber Crow, tell me what you thought. Remember, no sitting there with your lips pursed. Okay, well, let's start easy. How about characters? Who were some of your favorite characters? Can you contrast them with other characters? Come on now.
Burley.
Don't you love Burley?
Burley Coulter.
Burley Coulter. What's Burley like?
He's chill.
He's chill. Okay? A good friend, a really good friend. In fact, didn't Jayber say he was the best perquisite that he had in getting the barbershop?
Like an archetypical man's man.
He was a man's man, yeah. Has anybody read Fidelity besides Samuel? Okay. I'm sure you have. Okay. In another book, because in the Port William series, you're going to find these characters in other of the Port William books. Burley's old. He has a stroke. He ends up in the hospital. And his son, who was illegitimate, goes and takes him, puts him on a gurney, covers him with a sheet, takes him out of the hospital, takes him up into the woods to his hunting shed, puts him on a shelf, and lets him die out in the woods where he hunted and fished. Digs a grave, lines it with stones, and puts him in the grave right where he wanted to be. Okay. Other characters? How about Athie Keith? Yeah, Athie. We've got to talk about Athie Keith.
I appreciated Aunt Cordy and her role in his life as a young boy. And there was a part that really stood out to me on page 23 where he talks about the most useful parts of himself as a boy all came from her.
Mm-hmm.
How she poured into him, just like the hard work and doing things well.
Yep.
Having stepped in basically as like a foster mom
Mm-hmm.
and instilled in him as a young boy the things that he would have missed otherwise.
Yeah. And if you remember when he was getting settled in the barber shop, that building, he said that all the things that Aunt Cordy taught him about gardening, he brought it back to life. And I love that because one of the things in the book is these men or women pass down to their children how to care for the land, how to farm the land, how to feed the land so the land feeds you and your animals. And then they passed it down to their sons, to their children. And what's sad is eventually all that went away. That stopped happening. Yeah. Anybody else?
One of the, she's not lovable, but I think he nails Cecilia over. Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's exactly what's it.
Yeah.
And I have wrote in my notes, one of the great all-time lines of literature when she's coming up to the water party.
Yep.
It says she was walking like the divine wrath itself.
Yes. Yes.
I can so picture her.
Yes. She's a very colorful character in the book. She's offended by the whole world. And she's offended by everything that's in the world by the very fact that she doesn't have everything in the world and she thinks she should have everything in the world. Who does she line up with? If you had to compare characters, which character would she be closest to? Troy. Why is that, Chris?
Well, it's the greed.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's the resistance to life's limits.
Mm-hmm.
You know, she's not accepting of the realities of the limits of relationships and life and place and
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
No contentment.
No contentment at all.
Enjoying her place where she is.
Yeah. What a bitter. All she wanted to do was get to California. And I love how he says her sister was dead by then, and she had that nephew, and he welcomed her by doing what, Wes? But enrolling her in a nursing home. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Yes, she's that's how Wendell Berry is so he's such a great writer because and that's part of the point of Jayber Crow is there's this pathetic character. She really is pathetic, and yet he does a great job of making you have compassion for her and wishing on her behalf that things were different. And he does a great job of that. Okay, other characters?
He only showed up a little bit, but Sam Hanks.
Sam Hanks, yeah. And Jayber owing that $5, yeah.
Just the way he gave it to him.
Mm-hmm.
And he never acknowledged it.
Mm-hmm.
There was something about that
Yeah.
had a feel to it.
Yeah, it did, didn't it? Steered them in the right direction. I want to read a section out of here since we're on that. When I remember when my dad was dying, and I kept thinking my dad was the most merciful man I knew, and in the Beatitudes it says that the merciful will receive mercy, and I couldn't see how my dad was receiving mercy, and our pastor just pointed out, right like that 24 ways that God was showing mercy to my dad. And when you see this all the way through this book, Jayber talks many times that he wasn't making his life. He didn't go out and make his life. That when he got to the end, because he's writing this book at the end of his life, and he's looking back and he sees he didn't make his life. He was being led. And it might have taken lots of, different ways and roundabout ways. Page 322, if you can get there.
Wouldn't you say he was once he got to his place, there was just this contentment with, this is, I'm just content in this.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So every time I read this book, if you were to look at I've dog-eared, I know we're not supposed to do that, and you have to apologize to your mama for me, but the parts where if I just wanted to read something awesome, I would just turn to a dog-eared page, and there's something on that page. Not so much, you can tell, not so much at the beginning, because I'm not content in this first part of the book. And the moment of my contentment begins when he sees Burley on the lake during the flood. And then I go, he's home. And Jayber feels that way too. He finally, he came home, didn't he? Okay, what did I say? 322? Let me get there. Okay, so I'm in the second paragraph, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lines down from that second paragraph, those last 2 words, I can't look back. Do you see that? Anybody? I can't look back from where I am now and feel that I have been very much in charge of my life. Certainly, I have lived on the edge of the Port William community, and I am farther than ever out on the edge of it now. He lives in the river house now. But I feel that I have lived on the edge, even of my own life. I have made plans enough, but I see now that I have never lived by plan, any more than if I had been a bystander watching me live my life. I don't feel that I ever have been quite sure what was going on. Nearly everything that has happened to me has happened by surprise. All the important things have happened by surprise. And whatever has been happening usually has already happened before I have had time to expect it. The world doesn't stop because you are in love or in mourning or in need of time to think. And so when I have thought I was in my story or in charge of it, I really have only been on the edge of it, carried along. Is this because we are in an eternal story that is happening partly in time? That's what I was talking about before. The steps of a good man are ordered by the Lord. And so even when we think that, we're in control of things, of course we're making good decisions. We're relying on God giving us wisdom, and we're abiding by the principles of Scripture and operating within those parameters. But yet that big picture, when you get to the end of your life and you look back and you see where you came from the very beginning. Like when I look back, I know what my childhood's going to look like because I look at it quite often because it was wonderful. And then the paths that we've taken in our own life. And so it's some of that, all of what I've needed in my life, God has provided that mercy, that grace all through my life, okay? Okay, somebody else, I heard the name Maddie Chatham. Okay, so this is your chance. Go for it, girl.
I loved the character of Maddie Chatham. Like, I loved her contentment with her situation, and her family and her life, and how she just, I liked her character.
So what?
I didn't love the relationship with Jayber.
With Jayber, okay. What about the relationship with Troy?
Well, that's what I was talking about. I loved her character in that she was in this situation that you feel like she probably knew was not what she wanted ultimately, but her contentment and the way she honored him even in the middle of all of that.
She remained faithful to him. Anybody else want to chime in on Mattie?
She reminded me of the virtue woman in Proverbs 31. Because at certain places he describes her as like, I think when she was in the hospital, and he looks at her hands and he says, her hands were once able and strong. Now they are so weak and frail. And just the way she worked at church and just keeping up with her husband and his bad decisions. She's a woman of sorrow. She lost a daughter.
And her son, and her oldest son, yeah. Yeah, she was a strong woman.
Grace is probably a good word for her. She's graceful.
Yeah. Jayber called her perfect. She wasn't perfect, of course, but in his eyes she was. I know this is a weird question, but should she have married Troy?
That part didn't make sense to me.
That part didn't make sense.
It seemed like she, given her character throughout, it seemed like she had a huge blind spot.
I wonder where she got that from. Way back, maybe 6,000, 7,000, 8,000 years ago, maybe. Yep. Well, also, didn't Paul say that women are the weaker vessel because we were deceived? She really, when Troy showed up, she bit hook, line, and sinker, didn't she? Even against her father's wishes, which somehow we're not very forgiving in a book, are we? Once a character has done something, we don't tend to be forgiving. But again, Wendell Berry brings us to those points where, all the way to the point, if you remember, where Jayber Crow forgives Troy and loves Troy, you know. Isn't that what the gospel is? And yeah.
So to get to Jennifer's point, the truism is what? The greatest girls go for the worst guys. You know, like, why did they do that? It drives you crazy, and yet she falls for that same, well, he's the good-looking guy that's the captain of all the teams, and so we're naturally going to be together. Finds out, though, as time goes on, whoops, this was a screw-up, but I'm going forward anyway, so which makes her even more beautiful,
Right.
in addition to her physical.
Because she'd made the commitment,
Right.
and she remained faithful.
But
Yeah.
the good girl, pretty girl, ended up with
Yeah.
the guy headed for Skid Row. It's like
Yeah.
somewhat of a truth.
I kind of think of I don't know anything about football, I'm sorry, Mr. White, but I think I do know the word quarterback, and he's probably like the big cheese. And then the lead cheerleader. I don't know anything about that either, and I'm so glad we don't have that, you know. Yes, but it's kind of like they were sort of destined to get married, the basketball player and the cheerleader type, although she wasn't a cheerleader type. Okay, but yeah, she remained faithful, and I think we can, again, we want to say, you shouldn't have married him. You made your bed, now you got to lie in it. But at the same time, he brings us around to feel empathy, and that was a beautiful thing that Jayber felt empathy, not just knew how she felt. If you remember at the end, he has the dream, and he dreamed he was whom? Maddie, yeah. And what was the dream about? Her daughter, Liddy, getting killed, yeah. And how that I love the phrase, something that can never be forgotten or unknown. Like on this earth, that's just impossible to unknow something so horrible. I have to admit, I had a little weep at the end when he brought that up again. I'd already dealt with that, and he brought it up again. Okay, any other characters you want to talk about? Or shall we go? Perhaps when we talk about themes, we'll cover some more characters. Yes, sir.
I thought the character of it changed, it seemed like every year or two, the young preachers who would cycle through the town.
Yeah.
I thought that his description, how they all fit the type. The line was they had the mantle of power, but not the mantle of knowledge.
Yep. They're young seminarians coming in, expecting to be wise and impressive. Yeah, kind of wearing that cloak. All right, some of the themes in the book. And if you want to talk about the most controversial one, we can talk about that, or we can table that, but we do want to talk about it. Themes? Did you notice any themes running through the story? I've mentioned a couple.
One of the characters at the beginning, he goes and asks the schoolmaster about these doubts that he's been kind of sitting on.
Mm-hmm.
And the schoolmaster doesn't give him an answer. He just says, I don't have an answer for that.
Yeah.
You're gonna have to figure it out. And it's not like it's not an answer from ignorance though. On the his answer of I don't know seems more Socratic. I don't know than like a
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I think because he recognizes quickly, the schoolmaster does, that the question Jayber's asking is going to have to be lived instead of answered.
Mm-hmm.
And Jayber seems to have, I think at a couple different times, people later in his life who he sees as the schoolmaster, who are presenting that question to him again. And so he does have these moments throughout the book where he's kind of going back to speaking about things theologically.
And he says a couple of times he knew what he was talking about. For instance, and theologically, you could kind of pick this book apart if you knew Wendell Berry. He's very kind of liberal, I would say. What's the right word? Somebody help me out. He's a pacifist, and that shows up, doesn't it, in the book? Those are my least favorite parts about war. Yes. He still lives on a farm. He still farms with horses. And he's against agribusiness, big industrial farming, because that is what broke down the community culture of Port William and other small communities like that. But theologically, there's some weak areas theologically, but again, we're not going to use this as a Sunday school text, so don't carry it with your Bible. But he struggled so much with when Jesus said, "Love your enemies," and he could not reconcile that with how can you go to war if you love your enemies. Did he resolve part of that at least by the end of the book?
Doesn't it have with Troy where he eventually pities Troy instead of hating him?
Mm-hmm.
Well, he even told Troy to love his
Mm-hmm. And Troy said, "Where'd you get that blankety blank from?" Yeah, from Jesus Christ. Yeah. So some of those issues he does resolve. Not sure he resolves the war issue. He never gets into what just war versus unjust war, things like that. And that's a recurring theme in all of his books and his essays as well, and his nonfiction. Okay, some other themes besides that?
He handles change, I feel like, very well in his life.
Mm-hmm.
Which as a reader, it's cool to see something that you desire for yourself. I'm the worst at change. Sorry, I'm like revealing of myself here, but
No, that's,
like,
yeah.
I mean, all the changes that he goes through, just, the willingness to, hey, I'm going to pack up and go over here.
Mm-hmm.
And, just head over here, go find a job over here. Sure, I'll go do that.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to be a preacher. What? No, I'm not going to be a preacher
Yeah.
anymore.
Yeah.
Like, what in the world?
Yeah. Can you cut hair? Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
was
Yeah.
That one actually made
Yeah.
me laugh because I'm such a scaredy cat to do stuff that I don't know how to do.
Yeah.
I'm like, no way, I would never do that.
Yeah. Dig a grave?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
But like, I think that's so admirable of him that he's such a willing to do whatever.
Yeah.
Can I say something?
Yes, ma'am.
Just a thought when Ed was talking. I feel like he was able to do that because all of the things that was thrown on him in his childhood, things that were done to him, like his parents died, and then
Mm-hmm.
his aunt, what was her name?
Cordy?
Corey, and her husband died.
Mm-hmm.
And then he went to the orphanage. So I feel that kind of change that he was thrown into made him that flexible young man that he can pack a box
Mm-hmm.
and just go. I think that was the result of
Mm-hmm.
the way he grew up,
Yeah.
which things he didn't have control on.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he didn't have anything anchoring him.
No. He didn't have anything anchoring him.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then all these theological things he couldn't, yeah.
Just to say, like, in terms of how, I think sometimes perhaps in modernity we think about, like, we have to go find out who we are or something. What is my identity? Like, who am I really? And, like, this is a real trap that I think a lot of us can fall into. And I think that what we see is this idea of how much change is happening, and even, like, in his name, his place, like, all these things, like,
Yeah.
how is our identity mediated? And, like, so much of that is by, like, what we're called, who calls us that, where we are, who we're interacting with. Like, it's these choices that he's making and how he's dealing with these things that's really shaping who he is as a person.
Yeah. Even his choices when he works at the stables and he partakes in the nightlife, and then he goes on and he does the very same thing after he gets to Port William, and then change happens, the big change happens, and then he makes those other choices. It's like he's just I can use another sports thing. If you hit the ball, this is it for me for tonight. But like, if you have your foot this way, the ball's going to go that way. You want to change the way the ball goes, you change where your foot goes. Something like that. I think I remember my husband saying. So, other themes? Man, there's so many in here.
Maybe too, just with that, like the embodiment of the humility, and we see that across the entire community. These, and I don't know if it's a resolution to his thoughts on the war, the paragraph at 322, just that admittance that we see throughout his life, and then the acknowledgement at the end that
Yeah.
I don't know what I'm doing.
Yeah.
I show up and I do
And-
my best.
yeah.
And I think that's a beautiful thing, and we kind of see that changing of the guard with Troy and with society, and we see that, of course, in the way that the goal is not humility today, certainly.
Yeah.
It's the opposite. I mean, it's notoriety
Mm-hmm.
and excess.
Yeah. And there's a section in there where, what was her name? Starts with a G, Miss Gliddy or something. And the war has happened, and she goes, young men are going to be killed, because she had already lost a son. Maybe if somebody can remember her name. But anyhow, Jayber asked, where do these young men die? Where do they die, the ones that go off to war? Does anybody remember his answer? Where do they die when they go off to war? Nobody? I'm going to test you, you know. They die at home. That's where they really die. And they may have fallen in Vietnam like Jimmy did, but where all the dying happens is right at home. And so he says, all of a sudden, in a heartbeat of time, everything that's on a shelf, every knick-knack or every coat hanging in the closet or a bed made and a pennant over it or whatever, now becomes like a relic of that son that was killed. But it keeps coming, and he says, and we figure out how to just live through it. And so nowadays, modernity is, I'm in control of my fate, I'm in control of everything. And it's not like that. You took what came your way, you know. When you think about back in the plague, 1 in 3 children were taken by the plague, and life went on and life moved on. They go, well, that was our 1 out of 3 that was taken, and we go on with life. Yes, sir.
You said, well, Wendell Berry's kind of a liberal, but is he really? Because here's where I don't know whether to take issue or, because I think he would say, for the very reason he says they all died at home, he's got a problem with World War I, something that's going off somewhere over the ocean that some guy told all these kids they had to go fight in. He's got a problem with World War II. He personally had a problem with Vietnam.
Mm-hmm.
But when he describes the guys that are in the Civil War, what does he say? The one guy says, nobody's going to tell me what to do.
Mm-hmm.
And the other guy's like, no, the Union has to stay. It's not like he's saying those were unworthy. And like, I think, and you tell me what you think, but I think if Fort William was being invaded and they went and it was to fight for Fort William, my guess is he'd be the first guy to pick the gun up and go, let's fight him off.
Are you talking about Wendell Berry or Jayber?
Well,
Because didn't Jayber plan on going and enrolling, but he had something with his, something.
World War II.
World War II. I'm not going to be definitive. I've never met Wendell Berry, but what I've read about him, he would be a conscientious objector.
But what about fighting for Fort William?
You mean if it got to home?
Yes.
That I can't. I don't know.
Defending the land.
Yeah. Now, don't get me wrong. I love Wendell Berry, but a lot of things I wouldn't see eye to eye with him, and so I can't answer that question. If I got to the home front, what would happen?
I didn't get a feeling that he was volunteering to go to war and excited to do it.
He wasn't excited. No.
He said a bus showed up and we all got on,
Right.
Mm-hmm.
and I was going to have to go. So it wasn't like he was. I didn't feel that way.
And remember, at that time, he was what, 22, 23, something like that. He's writing this book as an old man. He says he's old. He's not really old in my eyes, but you know. But he has a different perspective now on how he's writing what happened way in the past. Okay. Did you pick up all those wonderful themes like family and the structure of family and community? If you read some of his other books, you're going to see that is a recurring theme, that farmers help other farmers. If you can't get your crop in because you broke your leg, you don't need to worry. Everybody's coming to help you. They work together, and That Distant Land, that's another book. By the way, I put the books in the Port William membership series right there. The ones that are highlighted are the ones I strongly recommend if you want to continue reading. And I have not read all of them. I've read most of them. I'm actually in Andy Catlett right now. But in That Distant Land, he tells a story about how Burley and Nathan Coulter and I think Jarrett was still alive at that time. But they all started working, planting the tobacco crop. They worked day after day from sunrise to late night. And they'd start at this end, and the younger ones, Nathan and somebody help me out. Tom would race. Thank you. They would race each other, and there's the older men, But they said, look, a foot planted is a foot planted. And but it was that working together. And another book, and I can't tell you which one it is, there's an old couple who have driven a wagon and horses forever, and they buy a car. And the husband is all like some men would do, thinking it's a speed race car, and they get caught in a ditch. They go in a ditch, and they get stuck there. Well, she has a friend that lives in another community who they call each other every single day. Every single day they talk. This couple just stays in the car in the ditch, I don't know, for a day and a half, because they know that when that friend tries to call her and she doesn't answer the phone, she's going to know something is wrong. And sure enough, here they come with their wagon and their horses to pull them out of the ditch. Well, that's the kind of community that Wendell Berry writes in all of these Port William books. And he tells that sad passage of time where all that goes away. Once you stop farming your land, you're not going to be milking cows. That means you're not going to be taking your milk and your eggs to the little country store to trade for sugar or trade for whatever. And so eventually, instead of taking your milk and your eggs to the store, you take your money, and here we are today is basically what he's saying. Okay? Let's see. How about, what do you think the climax of the book is? What do you think the climax is?
Water drinking party.
I agree. Is that Mr. That was one of my favorites. I knew you would come.
Yeah, we did.
I knew you would come. Yes. So what do you think is the turning point, Mr. Cowart? For me, the turning point is the climax of the book. It all falls in place after that.
When he marries Maddie Chatham.
Say it again.
When he marries Maddie Chatham.
Well,
No.
when he sees Troy, when he's dancing with some other woman.
There you go. And he goes.
So it's just before that
Yeah.
commitment he makes.
Yeah. And what is he saying when he does that?
Can't fit out of.
Yeah, that he can't fit out.
That he what?
He goes out a window he can't fit out.
I know. It ruins his jacket. Yeah. Yeah. Today we wouldn't worry about that jacket, but back then that was a big day. I know. Leaves his car for Clyde. What's he saying that changes everything at this point? What's he saying?
He said you and me were alike.
Yeah, yes. You and I are alike. And that was repugnant to Jayber Crow. That was repugnant. And he makes a big deal of it later. I am nothing like Troy. So, one of my favorite books is Pinocchio. I think every family with children should read it once a year. It has definite lessons in it. One of them is Pinocchio. Geppetto's gone out to get some food. Pinocchio's left at home. He gets tired. Because he's a spoiled little brat. And he says, I'm just going to go out and find my own food. So in the middle of the night, he goes through the village. He's ringing everybody's bell, waking them up in the middle of the night. And people are mad at him and don't give him anything. He gets to this house. He rings the bell. This old man leans out. And he says, what are you doing, you imp? And Pinocchio says, I am not an imp. You shouldn't call me an imp. And the old man says, if you don't want to be known as an imp, don't do the things an imp does. Yeah. And so Jayber had to think. Troy said, we're alike. And I'm not like Troy, but I'm doing the same things that Troy's doing. And that was, everything changed after that. Talk about a big change, leaving. He literally left his world behind and started a new world. Yeah. Yes, sir.
Is it just me, or was that scene so much of just birth happening?
Yeah.
In that scene, okay?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, the dark, the big dark place.
Wet, street,
Blood.
Yes. Yeah. He's wounded. And is that chapter called Born? I think that chapter is called Born. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, any other themes you want to talk about before we talk about the big thing? The thing that people...
About technology.
Say it again?
Pretty one-sided about technology.
Yes. Pro or con? Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
He didn't give any positive.
Yeah. Speaking of that, what are some of the enemies in the book? Not talking of... I think we would all say, well, Troy was the antagonist. If you had to pinpoint it, but what would you call the enemies in the book?
Government. Progression.
Modernization.
Yeah, progress.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Loss of a sense of place.
Yep. Yep.
Come to the barber shop to inspect it.
Yeah. Yeah. Did you notice how many times the man across the desk showed up? Yeah. And, you know, one of the things about Jayber Crow was, how did he feel about authority? First you have to define which authority, right? How did he view that? Say it again?
He rebelled against it.
In what way? How did he rebel against it? Every time that I can think of.
I don't think he did, though. He didn't like it. He didn't like them coming in and saying, you're going to have to change your sink, you're going to have to do all these things.
And so what did he do?
Retreated.
He retreated every time. He just got out of its way. The sad thing was, at one point he said, the day will come when we can't get out of its way. I think we're probably clearly at that point, yeah. There were a couple of things that he repeatedly wrote in caps that were enemies. The war, the economy, who said the news? The news. Why is that an enemy?
I think it represents a force outside for William that oppresses it, that changes it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Something you have to pay attention to that isn't your community.
Yeah. I don't know about you, I can watch a limited amount of all that transgender news. It's constant, even on not liberal networks. Okay, I think we have just enough time to talk about the marriage.
The mirage.
The what? The mirage? Yes. Yeah. So tell me what you think, and I'm not going to say anything because you've been quieter than I told you to be tonight. So you have to tell me. You have to speak up. If Mary Stout was here, she feels very strongly about how weird this marriage is.
So does Joy Cowart.
So does Joy.
So he's trying to say something about courtly love, is how I would interpret it.
Okay.
This perfect
faithfulness to an ideal woman. What I think he's trying to do. People agree with
It's like
that.
Dante and Beatrice kind of thing.
Right.
Say that again, Samuel?
Like Dante and Beatrice.
Yes. Actually, lots of people say this is just a retelling of Dante. In fact, there is a chapter, it starts off, let's see. It's where he says, you know what, I could make my way through a winding path, the path of darkness, something like that. Help me out, Samuel, because you know Dante.
It starts from like midway on life's path. Found myself in the forest.
Yeah,
Light over the hill.
say it again.
He sees the light over the hill.
Page 322. Let me look at that real fast. That's not it. Well, anyhow, he mentions the celestial city and so forth, like Pilgrim's Progress. So describe this marriage for me. Let's go from that angle. Describe the marriage for me.
What?
It's not.
One-sided?
Okay.
I think he's trying to find a way to articulate something, and he uses the word marriage. And I don't think it's the right word.
Okay.
It almost seems like what happens in Taditio cities, where like Sidney Carton is in love with Lucy, but then Lucy marries Vernon, and so Sidney Carton basically devotes himself to the family as a friend. I guess that was like the most similar thing I could think about until he mentioned the courtly love thing. So yeah, I definitely don't think marriage is the right word for what he's trying to describe. I think part of his problem is like there really is no way to describe. There's no conventional way to describe what he's trying to.
Okay, so he's definitely in love with her, right? You would agree with that?
He says early on that he's not. When she's young, he makes it very clear that he's not a young widow.
But later on, and remember, he's writing this at the end of his life, looking back. He's committed. So, faithful. Say it again.
He says he loves her.
Says he loves her. So, go ahead.
I think he applies this part of marriage. Like when I think about this marriage, it's a lonely marriage because he's alone, and he says it. He's at night by himself. He's very lonely and it's hard. And sometimes you say, why am I keeping this commitment? I'm the only one who knows about it. But I feel his commitment that he did towards Mary in his heart kept him from so many sins and just changed his life in a more pure way. Because he decided to be faithful to one woman, which he has no any relationships with her, physical or emotional or any way. But his faithfulness to her just kept him pure in his singleness, although it was hard for him. So I feel when he describes marriage, I think he's zooming on the loyalty part, especially that Troy was not loyal to Mary, and he wanted to be that husband to her, the one that's loyal.
In fact, he said she deserves a faithful husband. He's not a faithful husband. I'll be that faithful husband. But why a marriage? Don't we have lots and lots of books where somebody loves another person and that love is unrequited? Don't we?
There's a vow.
Yeah, so why write about a marriage? Like, who has this ever been written before?
Is that the church, the church, like that was the reading this morning, right? Like this, the bride of Christ, whether we choose to participate or not in the sanctity of the marriage, whether we choose or not is offered.
Is Christ like that towards us? Is he faithful? Would you say Jayber's love for Maddie is sacrificial? Would you say he's generous to her? Did he not give her money to get Jimmy out of jail? Was he patient with her? Did he seek his own? Did he bear all things? Did he do all those things that 1 Corinthians 13 says?
So I'm with you. I want to be there.
Are his initials JC?
I'm there. I'm going to finish with that. But you got to deal with the covenant of another man's wife, and you got to deal with the fact that the church is Christ's bride by right. He's purchased her righteously, and Maddie's not his by right.
Well, as you well know, every analogy eventually breaks down. So you can only take it so far. But my question would be, why a marriage? What author ever wrote that? Something so ridiculous as a man marrying a woman, and she doesn't marry him back and doesn't even know he's married to her. Like, that's a ridiculous thought. It can't just be Wendell Berry saying, oh, I think I'll come up with this cockamamie idea and make people fight over it, because people feel very strongly about that. The marriage was never consummated. It was never two-sided. He just was that faithful husband to her for the rest of his life, really. He made it.
Not two-sided, though?
Well,
in terms of what she could give to him?
So
she did come to him for the money for Jimmy, and she does go back to pick the flowers, and they see each other. Now, that's all she can do, but she does all that she can do.
So, do you know the story of Tristan and Isolde? Anybody besides Samuel? Samuel knows the story. So James knows the story, of course. Tristan and Isolde, one of the Arthurian stories. It's all of those are so like this, but anyhow, just hang there with it. Eventually, they fall in love. He came here to take her back to his uncle Mark, who wanted to marry her. They fall in love. They don't get married. It's not that they can't get married, but they say, no, we're not. Isolde belongs to this man. She marries him. They love each other deeply, but they have nothing. They don't do anything. And then one day they chance to meet in the woods in a meeting place. And then they keep meeting, and they keep meeting, and then eventually they are unfaithful. Okay, so you can see the similarities in that story and this story. The difference being, and you can almost make it an allegory if you're not careful, but Christ came as a man, but he didn't sin, and in a small way. Not that he owns Maddie, but they didn't sin in that. So what all happened in the woods at the end of the book, we're not told if anything was more than that, but he makes it pretty clear that that's all they did. And sometimes he'd wake up, she'd be gone, or she'd just take off and go another direction or something. But I still am not going to tell you that I've figured out that whole answer to why a marriage. And what if Jayber, he changed and he left so many places, like Ed said? Why not, when he realized he loved Maddie, why not just leave town and go barber someplace else? How would that have changed the story?
I think Jayber is an antitype to Troy. He's
For sure, yeah.
And I think that may be an answer towards your why marriage. This book revolved around Troy and Maddie's marriage. So his marriage is the same thing. It's a marriage in relief. It's an antitype.
And it is so much as this idea in the defense of the place. You know, he's limited, and the place is right, it's the individuals in the place that make up the community, and if his whole theme is community and being entrenched in that, you're limited from doing that. And when we think about as you said, the idea of modernity, that's either the beauty or the jeopardy in that we just go and start over, right? Like that's the issue. Maybe he doesn't see that as the option. Like this, you can't abandon.
He's finally home.
Yeah,
He's
you
home.
can't abandon your sense
Yeah,
of home,
yeah.
your place.
But I mean, Wendell Berry, isn't Wendell Berry the sovereign of what happens in the story? He really is, isn't he? He could write it like he wanted to. So Mary and I guess Joy, now that I've heard her view of it, that he's just a creep. I thought he used great restraint, I know Mary has said, if I knew a man was stalking my daughter like that, but I thought he used great restraint, and he heard everything in the town. He was the holder of all knowledge in the town, and yet this one thing he kept under wraps because it was very valuable to him.
Maybe he viewed himself like that was part of his identity. Is he viewed himself as like the true love of her. You go back to like when he was in the orphanage, it was all about stripping personal identity, like making everyone just first initial, last name. They almost took away the individualistic thing and just kind of made everyone the same. And now years later, he's like rediscovered who he really is. Like, I really am the one that loves her. And even though he can't have her at that point, he views himself as her true love. And so he dedicates himself to that identity. It's kind of restoring what was lost in his younger years.
And does he have the best part of marriage? Does he have that best part of it? Being faithful and being what you said that his identity is. I mean, be honest, how do you feel about your spouse? Are you so connected that you can't disconnect yourself from who you are as a couple?
You almost get like a Hosea and Gomer situation.
Yeah.
She keeps coming and going. And he just remains steadfast.
Yeah. When my mom died, it was like my dad died all over again. I couldn't disconnect them. I couldn't make, my dad died 10 years ago, and now today my mother died. I couldn't, because they were never disconnected in our family, in our minds. He wasn't gone. He was still, that part of our life. I don't know, chat it up a little bit. I know some of you have strong feelings about it because you've come and told me.
But they're not connected. That's what, he's the only one that knows.
Yes, he's the only one that knows. I still think it's more of a picture of what, say it again?
Creep.
Of a picture of many things, of mostly self-sacrifice. Just the sacrifice that he had to do to not say anything, and to whatever she needed, he would have been right there, just like a good husband would have been.
I like you to use the word restraint. Because Joy, he still cuts Troy's hair.
Yeah.
And Joy sits there and runs his mouth.
Yep.
And he talks about, at some points he talks about heaping coals of kindness on his head. He also shows incredible restraint.
He does. He said twice in the book, "Oh, is that? I had a knife. Scissors. I could have." A razor I could have slit his throat and said it was an accident,
Well, if you think about that we're in marriages is I think part of our sanctification, right? Like nobody helps us see our own faults like our spouse does. And through his, even if it's idealized, his commitment to Maddie, he becomes a better person. He grows, through he doesn't take that action, or at the end he really does find that he can love.
Yeah.
It really helps his
I love what Susanna said. It kept him from so many sins,
I also I see through the story Wendell Berry is bringing so many she and Troy did not share.
Mhm.
So they both like served in the church
Mhm.
together. So they meet at church. They both love nature. And
They both love Jimmy.
and they both love Jimmy.
Yeah,
Even the
yeah.
little girl,
Yeah.
because he was there, he witnessed
Mhm.
that.
Mhm.
And he loves children. And when
Mhm.
he described when they closed the school, and he said how I missed, how the school as if it birthed the children, just
Yeah.
bringing them in and out,
Yeah.
their voices, and so he
Yeah.
had love for children. He had a lot of common things with
Mhm.
Mary
Mhm.
that spouses share. In a
Mhm.
good marriage, you would have
Yeah.
those common places that
Yeah.
you would enjoy together, and even when they were walking in the nest egg, just quietly
Mhm.
and just looking at the nature, and that was enough, for them just to be together.
Yeah.
Just
Sometimes they didn't even say anything. Yeah. When Justin and I talk about Jayber Crow, because I'd called Justin, I don't know, a month or so ago, and I said, well, I'm going to lead this book discussion, just figuring out how to do it. And he goes, it's not a book that you do that. You just talk about it, And this is something most of y'all don't know about me, but before I came to Trinitas, I was a member of the fan club of the Andy Griffith Show. And there's no time now to be a member, but what you do as a member of the fan club of the Andy Griffith Show, it's called the Andy Griffith Rerun Watchers fan club, and all you do is watch the Andy Griffith Show. And what you do with this book is you talk about this book, and you say what you like and what you don't like, and so forth. But when Justin and I talk about this book, and we always bring up the marriage, because for us, and I'm not married to Justin, but so when I say for us, I'm not talking about us. I've actually graduated to, I guess, grandmother, because he called the other day and he said, I just got to tell you this would have been something I called my mom and told her about. So I've kind of taken that place. But anyhow, when we talk about it, we say this is the most beautiful thing, this marriage, because it was everything that was self-sacrificing and all-giving. And whether Wendell Berry did the math, if he carried the one, whatever, on how legal that is, that's probably not the right word. I don't know about that. But just the way that it played out and how Jayber sacrificed himself. He wanted Maddie, but again, that restraint. He sacrificed that desire of his to be something for Maddie that Maddie didn't have in Troy. And anyhow, okay, so any more you want to say on that? We have 12 minutes. And here's another little controversy. Justin and I do not agree on this. Did Jayber Crow die at the end of the book? Benjamin chuckled. Hannah says yes. Emily says yes. Anybody? You think he did? Okay. Here. James, what do you think?
We've been on this spot before. I'm undecided, but I
Okay.
did pick up his new book the membership. Does Jayber Crow come up in any of his other writings?
He does, but only a mention. So on this paper, you'll notice, I highlighted some. So Nathan Coulter will be mainly about Nathan Coulter, okay? But you'll meet some of these other people from Port William, because remember, it's a Port William membership. So a couple of the books, like Memory of Old Jack, goes back before this time. There's some stories in That Distant Land where they have a shootout in the street. Matt Feltner's dad. Actually, there's one 2022. No, I think that one's older. Let's see if I wrote it on here. anyhow, in Wendell Berry's writings, in his poetry, the trees, the top of the trees are symbolic of heaven in most of his poetry. And so, he's laying there, could be 4 days, 4 hours, however long, and he's looking up at the trees. So the next question may be connected to that, maybe not. Did Maddie ever, what's the right word? Is requite the right word for that? Did she ever requite his love?
Yes. The only thing she gave him was a smile, wasn't it?
They talked about it.
They talked about it.
His love.
I'd argue she was doing it the whole time. She was doing, that's what I was saying earlier, she did exactly what she could.
Do you remember
She
this?
couldn't completely requite it, but whatever she could do, she did.
And this, if she did, she used the same restraint, didn't she? Being faithful to Troy, yeah. Several times, Jayber mentions that he knew what Troy and Maddie shared, that she would give him that smile that only wives give their husbands. Do you remember that? And he mentions it several times, every time he thought about, how can she, number one, how could she even marry this guy? And how could she stay with him, And he'd bring up that smile. Well, right at the end, he's gone to see her and she gives him that smile. So, Hannah, what do you think about that? Come on. You what?
About him dying?
About him dying and about her giving him that smile. Are they married? Did they finally get married?
In their hearts.
In their hearts, maybe.
I think
Benjamin.
the fact that, I think because I read his poetry first, the whole heavenly, like all of the themes come out, like the
Yeah.
work and the rest,
Yeah,
like the personifications there all the way through. Like
yeah.
the
They're pretty
characters
consistent.
are personified work, characters are personified rest.
Yeah.
The way that he loves Maddie is giving her rest. Troy is.
What's Troy doing?
And he's cutting down all the trees.
Cutting down the one thing that she loved. Yeah,
And then they share that grief as she's dying.
yeah, yeah.
It's happening.
Just like you would if you were a husband and a wife, yeah. Anybody else? Say it again.
His watch stops. And then he walks
Oh,
out.
I missed that. His watch stops
Isn't it?
right there at the end.
When he wakes up, he sees that his watch is.
Oh, yes, I do remember that. Oh, it's Justin Hughes. Let's see what Justin has to say about this book.
Did you tell him to call me?
Oh, not about the book. Right, I was hoping he'd weigh in on it, Okay, so thoughts?
I'm
Just,
just gonna ask, so we know what Jayber did, but to me, the bigger question is why did he do it? Why was he restrained? Why did he, what's the ultimate one? In
So-
your mind, what's the ultimate one?
what keeps you restrained? What keeps you faithful to Emily?
Right? And not I, but Christ in me. And it seems to me that what he may be doing, one of the many things he may be doing, because he's giving issues that he has with the church, issues he has with faith, but there's no question that there's something that he really believes is the truth. And it seems to me that maybe Jayber Crow is like, this is what Christianity really ought to be, where you are, where it's manifested in who you are and what you're doing, and that's the real thing that we've missed, and certainly progress, and with all the smartest guys in the room with these liberal wars, they've all blown it. And he's trying to get some of it.
I don't know that I can find it, but there's a paragraph where he describes heaven and hell. It might be that 351. Let me see. Nope. 322. And
Celibacy too. celibate, it's because he is committed to a higher ordered love, right? And I think that's something that has to be contemplated and connected with Jayber.
You want to expound on that?
Well, I think that was my experiment. I mean, he doesn't go out for a base physical relationship. He experiences a higher order of affection, whether it's to truth or whether it's towards a perfect model of marriage or whether it's towards corporate love. Priests aren't necessarily incapable of feeling physical attraction. They have their celibate.
And almost monastic in a way in terms of his retreating from as things move in, he kind of, moves away.
So for the monks and the priests, back in medieval days, it took the Council of Trent to put a ixnay on their immorality, but Jayber didn't have that, did he? If I could find it, just my problem is I have too many pages turned. I know just about every page. It has a big writing. It says heaven and hell.
Yeah, it's towards the end.
It is towards the end. But anyhow, he says that the glue that holds it all together, do you remember what it says? The glue that holds it, it is beautiful, is love and sacrificial love. And that's what holds it. That's the underline. That's the connecting tissue there. Yeah.
Y'all talk about the interstate?
We did not talk about, we talked about the man across the desk.
Interstate's hard on my blood pressure.
Yeah. We did talk about how progress and all of that is coming to an end, and here we are. Nobody eats off your land, do you, for the most part? Person I know who does the most of that is Bobby McGee. Yeah.
One of the words that he used that I didn't catch in previous readings, he uses, is it Cecilia? He takes her name and says they're Cecilified. He talks about people who are enraptured with technology and they have this other desire for what they have as being Cecilified.
The only weakness I think that Wendell Berry had was giving her last name Overhold. It was a little too obvious, Yeah, but poor Roy is right. But if you think about all the relationships in the book, ultimately they come back to love and mercy, the compassion he had for Cecilia at the end. Couldn't figure out why she hated him, but he had such compassion for her at the end. Always had compassion for Roy, but what we talked about, coming to forgive Troy and to love Troy and feel sorry for Troy. Did you end up feeling sorry for Troy? Anybody? James? No?
Once I'm off, it's over.
Ooh, you better be careful, y'all.
Favorite character in the book?
Favorite character in the book? Go.
Well, that's my alter ego.
We already talked about,
Jill's my alter ego. No, I like Kathy.
Yeah, I think that was.
Kathy's like a West Todd kind of fellow.
Yes.
My all-time favorite is Burley Colton.
Yeah, we talked about that too. Yeah.
Throw in a word for Sam.
Sam.
His act of just extreme generosity and
Yep.
just love for.
Yep.
He recognized Jayber. He knew who he was.
Yep.
Knew his background.
Yep.
And then never acknowledged.
Yeah.
He gave him the money when he needed it.
Yeah, and just enough. He probably could have afforded $1,000, but he just gave him what he knew would be good for Jayber. So who else said? Somebody else said Sam earlier. You did. See. Other favorite? Anybody? Did you have a favorite, Ed? Somebody that aligned with?
I don't know, favorite character.
He's got Miranda.
I had like a favorite, not a favorite, but a moment I really liked when he bought the barber shop from the one guy.
Burley.
No.
You mean the bank manager?
Oh, the,
From the bank.
What was
Like
bank manager?
there was this. I remember leading up to it. It was so clear about how you're not accepted into this community yet. Like there was like those who are accepted and you're the outsiders, and he knew he wasn't in yet. But I felt like the banker treated him with such dignity, and even like there was this, I don't know, upper class, lower class, outsider, insider, but I love the way the banker treated him with such dignity.
yeah.
And it wasn't, you know.
That's a beautiful thing.
Mhm.
He says, it's almost as if he'd never seen, or it's almost as if everybody pulls their
Yes.
leg out of their shoes.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's the thing. Like,
Yeah.
it was so trashy.
Yeah.
They're like, oh, let me pull my money out of my sock.
Yeah.
But
As if that always
he didn't
happened.
turn his
Yeah.
nose up at that. I just thought that was a
Yeah.
cool moment.
Yeah. And that's part of that community, that Port William community. Yeah. Where we don't have that. I actually, I'm not saying this to get a raise or anything, Wes. I think Trinitas is a Port William. It really is. Yeah.
We make our own news.
We make our own news.
Our own news. We don't need outside news.
I can't think of a need. You what? What did he say?
We got creeps.
I can't think of a need I or my peers here have ever had that has not been met by some way. I think we're a Port William Christian school. Any other thoughts? James is on the edge of his seat. Frank.
Was there, so Jayber's name was Jonah?
Yes.
Was there, and I apologize if y'all's wrestlers when I got here. Is there a metaphor there of his first half of his life being in the whale, or?
We could.
He went through a flood.
He did go through a flood, yeah. I've never, in the things that I've read about Jayber Crow, I've not ever seen that it's an allegory in any way, but there are certainly writers like that, writers like C.S. Lewis, and they cannot write outside of their paradigm. It's just almost impossible for them. Something flows in. Did we read the notice? Okay, so I put you in the group that's going to the desert island, but now that I know how Joy feels, I'm not sure. Because of the oneness of the marriage covenant.
And she can be anywhere else. Joy's been wrong before.
So we can just read that again because it's so good. Persons attempting to find a text in this book will be prosecuted. Persons attempting to find a subtext will be banished. But persons attempting to explain, interpret, explicate, analyze, deconstruct, or otherwise understand it will be exiled to a desert island in the company only of other explainers. Ron Gilly will be there. Justin Hughes will be there. Will you be there? You be there? It is, but you know what? My mom had the same book, and so I thought, I'm going to leave mine like it is.
Well, I
And
got
then-
your replacement book.
Did you really?
I got your replacement book.
Okay, you're on the island.
I know. I got your replacement book, and I went ahead and wrote your name in it for you.
Oh my, wait. Did you write that? Did you?
Not write that. Wendell Berry.
Oh my word. Oh my goodness.
We love you, and we thank you for what you do for our students. and
Thank
for
you,
our
thank you, thank you. You're so welcome.